Alphabet, one of those other companies that we've been tracking here today. Alphabet second quarter earnings beat Wall Street expectations. The tech giant reported revenue of $74.6 billion, beating expectations for the $72.7 billion. And shares of Alphabet or Google, they are moving higher, benefiting from better than expected ad performance across platforms here, driven by growth in Google Search, which saw advertising revenue of $42.6 billion, and YouTube with $7.7 billion. Julie, you listened into this call, so what stood out to you?
What stood out to me is that the executives on the call really emphasized that they are not new to AI, that it's integrated into everything that they do. Sundar Pichai, the CEO, called it their 7th year as an AI-first company, that they sort of have been focusing on that in a different way. And so it was woven into different discussions. One of the ways I thought it was most interesting is the chief business officer on the call, Philip Schindler, talking about ad tools for their advertisers using AI, being able to try on clothing in a virtual way, for example. And those are tools that they offer to their advertiser, and that was something that was successful for them. They also talked a lot about the growth of YouTube here. So it's interesting that advertising, which in other ways is seen as waning, for Alphabet is still working. The one way it's not working is in what so-called Google Networks, which is their third-party ad services for other websites. That was not as strong, but all of their sort of Google native stuff was. The other thing that stood out to me is even as the company is investing in these AI-focused areas, there is still a lot of cost discipline. And that's something that Ruth Porat talked about on the call. Let's listen to her comments.
We've been saying for some time that we are focused on revenue growth ahead of expense growth, and achieved that for the first time in some time, and that is cost of sales plus operating expense overall. And we do remain very focused on durably re-engineering our cost base.
So I thought that was interesting tonally, that they're still focusing on the cost discipline that has been such a theme. You know, it doesn't seem like necessarily that the headcount reductions are going to continue. They'll do it sort of more strategically. But I thought that was interesting. And by the way, of course, one important note about Ruth Porat, she is going to be transitioning from a CFO role to a newly created role, president of the whole of the umbrella company Alphabet, and chief investment officer. So managing the company's investments in their sort of new bets and new technologies, et cetera. And there was also a lot of sort of congratulations for her on the call, and a lot of praise of her from Sundar Pichai and the others on the call.
Yeah, I think this goes to show, especially from the analyst community that has continued to cover Google or Alphabet over the years, even in the transition for many of those analysts as well, and their time listening into these calls and having communications with Ruth, they've regarded her as an all-world CFO. And that really is what she is at the end of the day, having to make sure that a company that is as large as Google, with as many people that come into all of the divisions, whether that be into some of the consumer tech products that Google has put forward in Pixel, or whether that is in terms of some of the services that businesses rely on at the end of the day. Ruth has had to oversee all that, steer this company through a myriad of different changes and evolutions as well. And so hat tip to her, of course, and that was certainly heartfelt on the call, I'm sure. And kind of coming back to what you were mentioning within some of the growth areas that they talked about on the call as well. And I think about YouTube, specifically because we are at such a nexus or an inflection point, perhaps even, for how the screen wars are moving forward. Because YouTube has competition from everybody that's the likes of Netflix or an HBO Max or a Disney Plus, all the way into an Instagram or even a Threads or a Snapchat or a TikTok. And so with all of the shoppability that they want to move forward with, all of the creator forward features that they're trying to implement as well, that's going to be one of the next drivers of revenue, or that next leg of revenue that they can perhaps hang the hat on here. And it'll be interesting to see where investors continue to kind of hold them up to a certain standard on that regard and some of those mechanisms and efforts.